The text came through on a Sunday evening while I was folding laundry in my one-bedroom apartment, the kind of mindless task that tricks you into thinking life is calm. My brother's name lit up the screen, and something old and tired shifted in my chest. Not fear exactly. More like a reflex. The way your hand moves away from a hot stove before your brain even registers the heat. I set down the shirt I was folding and read it. You need to stop acting like any of this involves you. The shop is ours. It has always been ours. Stay in your lane or stay out completely. I read it twice. Then a third time. My name is Claire. And from wherever you're listening to this, I need you to stay with me. Because the moment I read those words, something inside me that had been very quietly waiting for a very long time finally got the answer it needed. I set the phone face down on the bed and stood there in the middle of my apartment, surrounded by half-folded laundry and the low hum of the radiator, and I felt something I hadn't expected. Relief. Not anger. Not tears. Just the clean, quiet relief of a question finally answered. Let me back up. My family runs an auto repair shop in a mid-sized city in Ohio. My grandfather built it with his hands in the 1970s. My father grew it through the 90s. And when my father's health started slipping about 6 years ago, it was me who stepped in. Not my brother Derek. Not my mother. Me. I was 26 years old, working a full-time accounting job, and suddenly also managing the shop's books, handling vendor contracts, co-signing on a business line of credit because Derek's credit score was a disaster, and putting my own name on the commercial property insurance because, again, Derek had let the previous policy lapse without telling anyone. I never asked for recognition. I just didn't want my grandfather's work to disappear. But here's the thing about families that take. They don't see contribution as contribution, they see it as proof that you're willing to give more. Every time I solved a problem, it confirmed to them that I was the person who solved problems. And every time I was useful, it meant they never had to become useful themselves. Derek had been running the day-to-day for 2 years by the time that Sunday text arrived. My father was mostly recovered but tired. My mother handled the front desk 3 days a week. And I had remained in the background, the invisible infrastructure. My name on the credit line. My name on the insurance. My salary from my real job quietly subsidizing slow months because I had told myself it was temporary. It was never temporary. The Sunday text was the latest in a long pattern. A few months earlier, Derek had started making noises about buying out my father's share and restructuring the ownership. When I asked to be included in those conversations, since my name was literally on the debt, he told me I was being dramatic. When I asked our father directly, he said, "Let Derek handle it. He's the one in there every day." I had swallowed that. I had swallowed a lot of things. But that text on a Sunday evening while I was folding a blue linen shirt was the one I couldn't swallow. Stay in your lane or stay out completely. I picked the phone back up. I didn't respond to Derek. I opened my contacts instead and found the name of the attorney I had quietly consulted 3 weeks earlier, a woman named Patricia who specialized in small business law and who had told me, very gently, that I was in a precarious position. "Your exposure is real," she'd said. "If that business defaults on the credit line, the bank comes for you first. Your name is the most creditworthy one on the account." I had thanked her and told her I wasn't ready to do anything yet. That was 3 weeks ago. I texted her now. "I'm ready." Then I sat down on the edge of my bed and pulled up the folder on my laptop that I had been building for 4 months. Bank statements, vendor contracts with my signature, insurance documents, the original cosign agreement with the lender, every email where I had flagged a financial problem and been ignored. Every transfer I had made from my personal account to cover a shortfall. Documented, dated, organized. Patricia had told me what to do when I was ready. I had been ready for a while. I had just been hoping I wouldn't need to be. Derek had made the decision very simple. I worked for 2 hours that night. By the time the city outside had gone quiet and the radiator had clicked off, I had sent 3 emails, made 2 secure uploads to Patricia's client portal, and initiated the formal process to remove my name from the business line of credit. Not default it. Not damage it. Simply begin the legal process of removing my personal guarantee and notifying the lender that I was withdrawing as cosigner, which would require the business to refinance or find a replacement guarantor within 60 days. I also contacted the commercial insurance provider and requested removal from the primary policyholder position, effective at renewal in 43 days. I did not do any of this in anger. I want to be clear about that. I did it the way you'd fix a structural problem in a building. Carefully. With documentation. With the full understanding that the building might not survive the repair if the people inside it refused to take responsibility for what they'd let fall apart. I closed the laptop. I made tea. I slept better than I had in 2 years. The first call came at 6:47 the next morning. My mother. I let it go to voicemail. I was getting ready for my actual job, the one that paid my rent and funded my retirement account, and had nothing to do with carburetors or my brother's ego. I listened to the voicemail while I was waiting for the train. Her voice was not the cold, clipped tone I expected. It was confused. Almost small. Claire, honey, the bank sent something to the shop this morning. Derek is upset. Can you call me back? I'm sure it's some kind of mistake. A mistake. I put my earbuds away and stepped onto the train. By noon, I had 17 missed calls split between my mother, Derek, and a number I didn't recognize. I was in back-to-back meetings until 2, and I'll tell you honestly, sitting in those meetings knowing what was unfolding at the shop, I felt focused in a way I hadn't in years. Like something that had been dividing my attention for a very long time had finally been acknowledged. At 2:15, I listened to Derek's voicemails in the order they arrived. The first one, from early morning, was clipped and sharp. Call me back. Now. The second, from mid-morning, was louder. What did you do? Call me back immediately, Claire. This is not funny. The third, from just before noon, was different. The anger was still there, but underneath it was something that sounded almost like panic. The lender says you've initiated a cosigner removal. That triggers a review. They could call the whole line. Do you understand what you've done? Call me back. I did understand. That was the point. The unknown number had left a voicemail too. Professional voice, measured. An account manager at the lending institution, asking me to contact them to discuss the status of the cosigner arrangement and confirm my intentions. I called Patricia instead. She already knew. She had been expecting their calls too. She talked me through the next steps with the same steady calm she'd had during every conversation we'd had. When she was done, she paused. How are you holding up? She asked. It was such a simple question. I looked out my office window at the gray February skyline and thought about it honestly. I feel like I finally did the thing I should have done 2 years ago, I said. She didn't offer false comfort. She just said, that's usually how it feels. The lender called me back that afternoon, and I spoke to them directly, clearly, and without apology. I explained that I was exercising my rights under the cosigner agreement, that I was providing the required notice window, and that I had documentation of every contribution I had made. I gave them Patricia's contact information. The call lasted 11 minutes. When I hung up, I sat very still for a moment. Then I went back to work. Derek showed up at my apartment that evening. I saw his truck pull up from my window and felt my stomach clench in the old familiar way, that animal part of me that had been trained since childhood to brace for his anger. He had always been the louder one. The one who argued until the room caved in just to make him stop. I had spent years being the room that caved. I watched him through the window for a moment before I went to the door. He knocked hard. Not a knock that asks. A knock that assumes. I opened the door. He looked like he hadn't slept and was trying very hard not to let that show. His jaw was tight. His eyes were doing that thing they did when he was working himself up, flicking slightly, like he was sorting through which version of this confrontation to deploy first. We need to talk, he said. Okay, I said. I did not move to let him in. He waited. When I didn't step aside, something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe. He wasn't used to the door staying closed. Are you seriously not going to let me in? I'm listening, I said. What do you want to say? He exhaled sharply through his nose. What I want to say is that what you did today could destroy the shop. The lender is reviewing the entire line. If they call it, we lose our operating capital. We'd have to shut down within weeks. I held his gaze. I know. Then why would you? Because you told me to stay in my lane or stay out completely, I said. I chose completely. His mouth opened and then closed. I watched him in the porch light, this person I had known my entire life, and for the first time I didn't feel the pull to fix it, to soften it, to find some way to make us both comfortable at the cost of the truth. Derek, I said. My name has been on that credit line for 4 years. I have covered shortfalls out of my own savings 6 times. I asked to be included in the ownership restructuring conversation, and you told me I was being dramatic, and then you texted me to stay out. So I am staying out. Legally, properly, and in writing. That's not he started. I'm not finished, I said, and something in my voice must have registered because he actually stopped. I didn't do this to hurt you. I did it because continuing to carry legal and financial risk for a business that doesn't acknowledge me as anything other than a convenience was going to cost me eventually. I chose to control when and how. You have 60 days. Use them. He stared at me. For a moment, he looked less like my antagonist and more like a person who had simply never considered that the system he had been relying on might ever stop running. Mom is devastated, he said finally. It was a pivot. I recognized it. Moving to guilt when logic hadn't worked. Mom can call me herself, I said. Good night, Derek. And I closed the door. I stood on the other side of it, back against the wood, heart loud in my ears. I waited. Part of me expected him to pound on it, to yell, to escalate the way he always had when someone didn't give him what he wanted. He didn't. After a minute, I heard his footsteps on the stairs. Then the outer door. Then the sound of his truck starting and pulling away from the curb. I slid down until I was sitting on the floor with my back against the door and my knees pulled up, and I stayed there for a while. I was not okay in a simple way. But I was okay in a real way, the kind that doesn't require anyone else to confirm it. My mother called the next morning, and I answered. Her voice was different from the voicemail. It had found its sharper register. Claire, what you're doing to this family. Mom, I said quietly. I need you to hear me. I have been a co-signer on a 6-figure credit line for 4 years. I have put my own money into that shop. I asked to be part of the ownership conversation, and I was dismissed. Then Derek told me to stay out. I am staying out. There is no version of this where I am the one who did something to this family. Silence. Then, Derek needs you. The shop needs you. I closed my eyes. Outside, a garbage truck was grinding down the street, the most ordinary sound in the world. The shop needs someone to refinance the credit line and take responsibility for its own operations, I said. I need to not be legally responsible for a business that tells me I have no standing in it. Both of those things can be true at the same time. You're being cruel, she said. I'm being clear, I said. I love you. But I'm not reversing this. She hung up. I poured a second cup of coffee and stood at my kitchen window for a long time, watching the street below. 2 kids in heavy coats were arguing over a bike. A woman walked a very small, very serious-looking dog. A delivery driver double-parked and sprinted toward a building entrance. Life going on, indifferent and continuous. I had spent years arranging my life around the shop's crises. Rearranging my own budget, my own plans, my own weekends. Answering calls during vacations. Lying awake running numbers that were not my responsibility to run. I had told myself it was because I loved my family. And that was true. But I had also been trained to confuse love with availability. To believe that being needed was the same as being valued. It wasn't. Being needed meant they called me when something was broken. Being valued would have meant they called me when something was decided. They had never once called me when something was decided. The days that followed were a lesson in what happens when you stop being the person who absorbs the chaos. The chaos doesn't disappear. It just finds its level. Derek sent me 3 more texts over the following week, each one a slightly different flavor of the same pressure. The first was angry. The second tried a kind of grudging logic, laying out what refinancing would cost and implying that if I would just stay on the line for another year, he would get the business restructured and buy me out properly. I showed it to Patricia. She advised me to let the process run. The third text was the one I hadn't expected. I didn't realize how much you were actually carrying. I'm not saying I was right. I'm saying I didn't understand the full picture. Can we talk? I read it sitting at my desk during a lunch break. Read it twice. Let it sit there. I want to be honest about what that text did to me, because I think it's the part people don't talk about enough. It would have been easier if Derek had stayed purely awful. If the villain had stayed clean. But he sent me a text that sounded, for the first time, like a human being looking at himself. And I felt 2 things simultaneously. I felt the pull toward reconciliation, toward the version of my family I had always wanted us to be. And I felt, just as clearly, the recognition that one text does not undo 4 years. That the reason he was finally considering my perspective was not a change of heart. It was the removal of my name from a document. People don't see you when you're holding them up. They only notice the weight when you put it down. I responded 3 days later. I'm glad you're thinking about it. I'm not ready to talk yet. Give me some time. He did not respond right away. That was fine. I had time now. I had all kinds of time that used to belong to other people's problems. Patricia updated me 2 weeks later. The business had found a co-signer replacement, a family friend of my father's who had agreed to step in. The credit line was being refinanced at a higher rate, but it was being refinanced. The shop was not going to collapse. It did not feel like victory. It felt like the conclusion of something that should have been resolved years earlier by people who were capable of resolving it without me. I asked Patricia to confirm the timeline for my full removal from all associated documents. She told me we were on track. 6 to 8 more weeks and I would be fully and legally clear. 6 to 8 weeks. I thought about how long I had been tied to that building in ways nobody acknowledged. I thought about the Sunday evenings spent on hold with vendors. The Saturday morning, I drove 40 minutes to personally deliver a deposit because Derek had overslept. The year I didn't take a real vacation because I was afraid something would fall apart without me available to catch it. I thought about my grandfather, who had built something with his hands and meant it to be a place the family took pride in. I think he would have understood. I think he would have said that pride isn't the same as sacrifice, and that love isn't the same as collateral. On a Friday evening toward the end of February, I did something I had been quietly looking forward to for weeks. I went to a travel agency's website, the kind of deliberate choice that feels like ceremony, and I booked a trip to Portugal for late spring. 12 days, solo. Lisbon and the Algarve coast, and one night in a small town. I found in a travel essay that described it as the kind of place where you could have the same cafe table every morning and feel like you'd always lived there. I had never taken a trip that was purely for me. Every vacation I'd taken in the last several years had been calibrated around other people's schedules, other people's budgets, other people's ideas of what counted as a good time. I sat at my kitchen table with the confirmation email open on my laptop and felt something warm move through my chest. Not triumph. Not satisfaction at anyone else's expense. Just the simple, almost embarrassing pleasure of wanting something small and beautiful and entirely my own, and allowing myself to have it. I got a call from my father that weekend. He was the one family member who had stayed quiet through all of it. I had wondered about that. My father had started the co-signing arrangement in the first place, had introduced me to the lender, had been the one who framed it as just temporary, just until Derek gets on his feet. His voice on the phone was tired in a way that had nothing to do with his health. It was the tired of someone who had been sitting with something uncomfortable. I owe you an apology, he said. I didn't say anything for a moment. When your mother and I got older, he continued, we leaned on you in ways we shouldn't have. Not because you weren't capable, because you never said no. And I think we mistook that for it being okay. I pressed my hand flat on the kitchen table and looked at the grain of the wood. It wasn't okay, I said. But I know you didn't mean it to be unkind." "No," he said. "I didn't. I also didn't think carefully enough about what it was costing you." We talked for 20 minutes. It was not a resolution in any movie sense of the word. It was two people being more honest with each other than they had managed to be for years, and it was enough. Not everything, but enough. When we hung up, I sat quietly in my apartment for a while. There is a particular kind of grief that comes with families like this, and I want to name it clearly because I think it is the part that catches people off guard. It's not just grief about what happened. It's grief about what didn't happen. All the years of easy belonging that some families seem to have and that yours was never quite able to manage. All the times you showed up hoping it would be different and left having played the same role again. You can be right about leaving and still grieve the thing you were hoping to stay for. Both are true. Both get to exist. Patricia sent me the final paperwork on a Thursday in late March. My name, fully removed. The cosign dissolved, the insurance updated. Every document that had ever put my financial life at risk on behalf of a business that had not wanted me as a partner had been corrected. I printed the confirmation page, which is a thing I never do. I am a keep everything digital person, but I printed this one and folded it and put it in the small wooden box on my dresser where I keep things that matter. My grandmother's ring. A note my best friend wrote me when I got my first real job. The confirmation of my Portugal flights. That evening, I walked to a plant shop 2 blocks from my apartment that I had been passing for a year and a half without going in. I bought a small fig tree in a terracotta pot. The woman at the counter told me fig trees are stubborn and long-lived, that they don't do well when they're moved too often, but that once they establish somewhere, they're almost impossible to kill. I carried it home and set it on my windowsill where it would get the best light. That was the beginning, I think. Not of some new dramatic chapter, just of a life that belonged more fully to me. My brother and I did eventually talk. It was awkward in the way that honest conversations usually are after long stretches of dishonesty. He said things he should have said sooner. I said things I had needed to say for years. We didn't arrive at the same place, but we arrived at a place where we could both stand without pretending. My mother took longer. She is still, in some ways, taking longer. There are ill, and where I can feel her wanting me to recast the whole thing as a misunderstanding, to agree that no one meant any harm, and close the door on the discomfort. I don't close that door anymore. But I also don't barricade it. My father and I talk every Sunday now. Nothing dramatic. He asks about work and I ask about his physical therapy, and we have started watching the same documentary series, so we have something low stakes to discuss. It is the most normal thing we have ever built between us. I am not telling you this story because I came out ahead. I am not telling you it to perform strength I don't always feel, or to suggest that the right financial documents can fix the complicated ache of being someone's resource when you wanted to be their person. I'm telling you because the Sunday I read that text in my apartment and felt relief instead of fear, I understood something I hadn't been able to name before. There is a version of loyalty that is really just fear wearing a family's face. And you can love people genuinely, fiercely, down to the bone, and still decide that your name, your credit, your financial future, your Sunday evenings, and your sense of your own worth are not items on the table. You are allowed to want something for yourself. You are allowed to be the person who puts down the weight and watches to see if anyone else picks it up. You are allowed to go to Portugal. My fig tree has 3 new leaves. My name is not on anything I didn't choose. And for the first time in longer than I can remember, when Sunday evening comes and the city goes quiet and I'm standing in my kitchen with no crisis to solve, I feel like the silence belongs to me.